Michelle.
Hey, Kim.
How you doing?
Good.
You like the new intro?
I love it. It was the 60 years of experience combined that was like, ooh,
Well, yeah, that's a little mind-blowing when you think about it, huh?
it's
Like,
a lot.
wow. Yeah. Well, welcome to those of you that may be joining us or seeing us later. You have landed on the Business Chicks. And tonight we're just going to be kind of throwing topics at each other and seeing what the other thinks and responds. So I am Kim and that's Michelle.
Hi.
All right, so let's just jump right in. Michelle, I'm going to let you have the first topic. And if you end up wanting me to pull up a website or something, I think we can do that. So,
Okay. I think I'm okay. I'm going to spew out some statistics, but I think overall will probably be good. So my first one, and when we were coming up with this, I kind of came up with 3 items that have over years just been things I've thought about, things I see my kids go through because I have girls, things like that. So this is kind of where I'm coming from this. So the first one is leadership and representation. And you and I have had conversations about almost every one that I'm going to talk about too. But this is progress stalling and backlash rising. So according to McKinsey in 2023, women now hold just under 30% of C-suite positions in the US. So progress is painfully slow with that. Nowhere near equity. Corporate DEI rollbacks threaten to erase gains that have already been made, but only 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women as of 2024.
Wow.
The venture capital gap is what really caught me by surprise. According to PitchBook in 2023, less than 2% of venture capital funding went to women-led startups. So a number that has shifted over the years, but now we're only at 2% in over a decade. The perception of women leaders is still a bias, which we talked about the other night, right? So men being praised as visionaries or bold, and women being too emotional or abrasive. So my question is, how can women still rise in leadership amid all of this? And how do we educate companies, or what do companies need to do to help this progress?
It is so funny that you brought up that topic because that's actually one of mine tonight too, was the same kind of thing.
It is.
Yep. And in fact, it was going to be the second one, but I'm going to go ahead and make it the first one because it's, one of the things like I was going to say when I was going to start this topic was we hear that gender in business and leadership is no longer a thing. Like that's what typically, when I bring it up, and I think I've told you before, I've never been one to say, because in my early roles, I didn't have any issue with being a woman. In fact, my first boss, like I mentioned the other night, was super, super supportive. He had daughters that were super, super strong women and had risen high in the military. So he was very supportive. So my first experiences were, I didn't see any of that. Right. So, kind of like with everything, when we don't experience it, we don't necessarily know that it's a thing or that it exists. And then, I started my own business. And so really the first 20 years, I would say, of my career, I didn't experience it at all. And so it's not that I didn't think it was a thing, but I just didn't talk about it and I didn't really dwell on it. And it's only been like the last 8 years where and to know nobody's fault. I know my husband said the other night that we were disclaiming the whole thing. I'll just say it one time. To nobody's fault. I don't think it's intentional on the part of anybody that I have worked for or with over the last 8 years. I think it's just a factor. For one, I've been in construction industries, manufacturing. So I think that tends to be a male-dominated industry in general. But then two, I think despite, some people being very strong, and I will say that both of our bosses are very strong supporters. And Michelle and I, for those of you that don't know, I'm not going to say where we work, but we have the same bosses. Our direct boss is the same and our boss above him. And then there's one more level that's the CEO. But I will say our 2 direct bosses are very supportive of women. Now, I'm not going to disclaim it the rest of the time. If our bosses listen, you can hear me say that they are very supportive of women. However, as a whole, as an industry, it's just something that has been so pervasive over time. Okay, I'm going to see if I can share a URL. It's the first time I've tried to do this in a long time. So let's see if it works. I'm going to share my screen. Allow. Okay. And let's see. I need to share a new window. Here we go. New window. I'm going to open one, and I'm going to open this URL, and it has some facts about kind of what you were talking about. And I'm going to have to put my glasses on, but it is, let's see if I can share it now. Let's see if this works. Chrome tab. There we go. Women in business. I think I got it. Okay.
Yay.
Yeah, we're seeing it. Yay. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to have to put on my glasses, but yeah, these are the statistics that you were kind of mentioning. And it's crazy, this shows global and the US. Chief executive officer, 26%, chief operating, chief finance, marketing seems to be a little higher. I would maybe agree with that, but it's still, it's still below half, right? Partner is 10%, chairperson 12. All these numbers are just really, really, sad, I would say. Sad is the word, right? So then you have these, right? Gender parity strategies, kind of what you were asking about, what strategies have been deployed and are they working? And, so employees all feel they're treated equally within our business. 30% say yes. Female senior leaders are visible, 23%. Employees feel we have an inclusive environment, 31%. There has been an increase in female employees progressing through the business to senior leadership, 26%. Here we are, like you were saying,
right.
2025,
right.
26%. Now, I will say it is one thing about, and I'll just, be frank about our company. I do think we have supportive, men who are supportive of women who like to give women opportunities, but there is, if you look at our leadership team, right, there's 2 out of 11, I think, and so, and that's just what you see across the board. And so, you're asking, how do we solve that? And it's some of the strategies I was coming up were saying, here's another thing I want to read real quick, because I think this blew my mind. Let's see if it shares the same window. Let's see. Are we sharing my, yeah, perfect. Okay. So why men get promoted, because that was how I was going to kind of lead off, right? Is do men get promoted based on their potential while women get promoted based on what they've done? And studies say that is exactly true. But this is where it's just so interesting. So it says a study by Frontiers in Psychology shows that when it comes to getting promoted, men just need to show potential while women have to prove performance. In this study, participants, had to evaluate 4 resumes. Well, won't even read that, but it says this unconscious bias continues to cost women earned promotions, and of course, and contributes to the gender pay gap, which is a whole other subject we could talk about, right?
Yes.
And so it says researchers also theorize that this bias keeps women siloed in admin or human resources positions and gives them a disadvantage when hiring managers come looking for overachieving roles or overarching roles that rely more heavily on potential. Now, how to correct the gap? This is what you asked, right? The potential problem starts as early as the application stage and can happen even before the hiring manager gets involved. Women won't apply for positions based on their potential. Instead, they want to satisfy every requirement. Study after study shows women tend to avoid applying to positions where they don't satisfy all requirements and apply 20% less to a job posting than men. So it says, it talks about an example, but here's where it gets like really crazy to me. And then I will turn it over to you because I think you're going to have a few comments about this. It is not that women don't apply because they don't think they're qualified. Instead, it's because women don't assume the qualifications are negotiable, whereas men have a default perception that everything is negotiable. This also means that women within an organization often end up doing the job of the person above them to prove they can do it before they get promoted or compensated. And what's worse, it's only usually during a crisis that women get promoted to C-suite, or we could say, highest level roles, right? A phenomenon known as the glass cliff if a company or team is having a rough time, a downturn, managerial failures, or other market failures, they're more likely to bring in a woman to a senior position than they would otherwise. But they bring them in and then don't institutionally support them or set them up for success. Instead, companies need to think about women as candidates all of the time in times of prosperity and times of difficulty. So it's just very interesting that it starts all the way back at hiring. So you're asking, how do we fix it? I think we have to look to the hiring process and say, companies really need to examine, are we giving women the same opportunity as men? Are we hiring women based on what we see as their potential versus what they've done in the past, the jobs they've held, et cetera, versus letting a man actually move up into a senior position? And this is where I think you're going to have a lot to say, because I started thinking about it and I'm like, in every instance I know of, like in a long time, that seems to be the case where men will be hired up into a position that's above where they've been versus women have to prove that they have experience in that position before they get it. Like women tend to move laterally, and it's finding that one time, where you're promoted from within and get to move up so that you could move laterally, while men move up in a stair step type format.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, and I agree 100%. And I think it goes back to our mentality, right? We had the conversation before. Women want to say, how can I do better?
Right.
What can I do to make things better? And men want to say, this is what I bring to the table. And it's something that is innate. It's not right or wrong for either situation. Right. It's something that we're taught when we go back again to what we talked about the other night of, we're taught to be nice and, play nice and things like that. And boys and men are taught to be bold. And exactly. And this continues on to where we are now. That to me is what the key is we've got to, number one, we've got to start getting women out of these mindsets younger.
Absolutely.
Right. And we've got to start getting them to be more bold in what they're applying for, what they're asking for. Not angry, not any of that. They have to just stand for themselves and stand their ground. And if the company's not going to be what they need it to be, we're going to have to find other opportunities. And I think part of that is why a lot of women are starting their own businesses for 100%. Years now, right? Because they're wanting to set their own terms, their own limits. But then that brings us into, why are the venture capitalists not willing to support that with women, but they're willing to support it with men, when historically women are better with money?
Yep. It's so interesting. I was thinking the exact same thing you were saying, is that a lot of times when women get frustrated, they just decide, okay, I'm going to start my own business where nobody can hold me back. Right. And then we have the venture capitalist problem. And in just a second, I'll zoom in some more on this, but this is kind of the, like, what's in it for me, like what you were just saying, the history of women. It's almost like we've just, and that's kind of why we're doing this, right? Because I think what we're going to probably end up getting into as we proceed in the podcast, so based on the things that we've talked about, is how do you do that, right? How do you become more bold? How do you begin to step out of that comfort zone and ask for the things that you want and you need? And that's going to be actually preview to my little second topic, was about apologizing and how we stop apologizing, because I feel like that's a big part of it too, is men don't often apologize as much as women. And what it does is it puts us in this perceived subservient role. I feel like we're rule followers, right? And so when it comes to those promotions and those getting the higher positions, et cetera, I think sometimes we're often overlooked because we'll take it. I mean, we as a metaphorical we, right? Yes. Women often will take it. A man sometimes, will, oh, well, I'll just go find another job. And they have no problem saying that. A woman says that, and it's taken as a threat. It's not, not even a good threat. It's taken as oh, go ahead, versus a man doesn't. We're like, oh, we don't want to lose him. And maybe he's not even in as important of a position, but a guy seems like can say that, and it becomes a negotiating, factor. Like, oh, we don't want to lose him. A woman says that, and it's like, Are you giving me an ultimatum? It's
Right.
weird, right?
And maybe it goes back to the emotional thing, right? Where we
Yes.
have that, where they're bold and we're emotional.
Right. It comes across, or it's
So,
perceived as
mhm,
emotional versus actually
mhm,
strategic.
correct.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah, it's so crazy. It's so hard to navigate. And what you're saying about, women tend to be more even better with money, but women are, what does that say? I don't have my glasses on. 3% more likely, or is that 30? Okay,
mhm,
so women are 3% more likely to start a business than men. About
mhm,
849 women in businesses open every day. Women in
mhm,
businesses employ over 9.4 million workers. But here's what some of the impact. Here we go. Women, the impact of female leaders in organizations. They drive a 5.5%. I would imagine this is even higher, but okay, we'll go with that.
mhm,
5.5% increase in job engagement compared to 2.6 for male leaders. They may increase the performance of male followers by
mhm.
5.5% as compared to men in the lead. So,
Interesting.
in that, I mean, women score
Yeah.
higher in social perceptiveness, reading
Mhm,
nonverbal clues, empathy, and collaboration. Oh, check out this. As a result, teams with more than 50% of women have a higher collective intelligence that makes them better at decision making and innovation. And then
mhm,
right below that, peace agreements are 35% more likely to last at least 15 years if women leaders are engaged in their creation. And countries with a greater share of women cabinet ministers exhibit greater levels of confidence in their national government. So, in just a second, we'll get to how employers can support women. But look, this is from PricewaterhouseCoopers. So, this is
mhm.
not some just fly by night information,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Right.
And it says 63 years. By their estimate, we still have 63 more years to narrow the gender pay gap. 63 years.
Unbelievable.
We have 30 years to narrow the participation gap. And we have 67 years for female full-time employed share to be equal to the male share. That's absolutely ridiculous.
It's unbelievable. And shame on companies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you want to move into the second round, this kind of does feed in a little bit to my second
Good. Go ahead.
part of it is work-life balance and caregiving pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So is that some of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if we know women are underrepresented at the top, and then we talk about the biggest reason why, how much of that leadership gap comes down to impossible balancing acts, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
working and caregiving, whether it's children, whether it's parents, whether it's spouses. It's
Mm-hmm.
one thing to fight for a seat at the table, but it's another one to just stay in the workforce a lot of times. I mean, we are one of the US is the only developed country without federally mandated maternity leave. And forcing women to juggle newborn care with care stability. 77% of the US companies offer a form of maternity leave, but only 27% go beyond 6 weeks. And anybody that's had a kid, adopted a kid, taken over for a family member when needed, anything like that, 6 weeks is you're not even
Minimal.
your head is even straight by then.
Right. Right.
You're
Right.
not sleeping through the night either.
Right.
Women are 3 times more likely than men to quit or scale back their career due to caregiving demands.
Mm-hmm.
And burnout is disproportionately high for women at a rate of 43% of women managers versus 31% of men report burnout, according to McKinsey in 2023. So flexible work schedules, hybrid, remote, benefit women disproportionately. But now all these companies are wanting people to come back. So, it's where does it put that? So, and as a single mom, I get this. When I was
Mm-hmm.
raising kids and balancing work and kids' activities outside of school, it makes you wonder, how can we truly consider ourselves a modern society
Mm-hmm.
if we don't fully recognize and support the value of women bringing to the workplace? And this is a good example of what you've posted here.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you could ask anyone in the company we're in now, in any company that you're in, about any of these statistics, and they would not be able to answer that. I wouldn't have been able to answer it the way that you just read it to me.
I didn't understand it was that that bad. I
Mhm.
really didn't. And again, what last time I said, kudos to our company and the companies I've been in for the past 2 years for me not knowing it was this bad, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
that's horrible. And you're dead on. I mean, you can see the PricewaterhouseCooper, how employers can support women in the
Mhm.
workplace. The first thing is flexibility, right? And when
Right.
we look at the value up here, right, that women bring to the table with empathy, reading
Mhm.
nonverbal clues, collaboration, one of the things that is commonly said about different people, different, is to me, and I'm sure it is to you too, why don't you handle this because you have a
Yes.
better way with words? I get that a lot,
Mhm.
right? Why don't you handle this because you have a way with words or you have a way with people? And then
Right.
instead, in general, then that I'm sure that is the case in many companies, but then
Mhm.
you find what we read in that other article where you have women doing the work and men getting the credit. And
Right.
that's totally, I mean, you would think we would be further along than that
Mhm.
at
Yeah.
this point.
Mhm.
And so it says that, flexibility, right? Some support, I'm tongue tied, support employees to balance work with caring responsibilities. Exactly what you said. Start with
Mhm.
flexible start and finish times. One of the things that I feel very, very strongly about is I am not a morning person. So sometimes, if I had to be at a job and our work is very, somewhat flexible, right? But if
Mhm.
I had to be at a job at 7:30, let's say that, 7:30 to 4:30, for example, my first 2 hours are going to be wasted because
Mhm.
that is just not how I operate. However, if I am allowed flexibility, like I am, then
Mhm.
you're going to get that back in the form of a reward because I am a night person. So
Mhm.
by giving that little bit of flexibility, then I'm going to give you more hours because at night is when I'm creative. At night is when I'm, logged in, clogged in, whatever that word
Mhm.
is.
Yeah.
I am locked in. That's what I was looking for. I am
Mhm.
locked in at night. So generally speaking, every night I work from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. because that is when I am on, right? That is when I
Right.
can solve problems that I couldn't solve during the day. I can get
Mhm.
things done because nobody's calling me or emailing me.
Right.
So if companies are flexible, and our company is, that
Mhm.
works fantastic. But if a company is not, think about what you're losing out because if you're
Absolutely.
not going to be flexible with me, I'm not going to
Mhm.
give to you, right?
Right.
So
Right.
if you're not going to give women that level of flexibility, think of what you're missing out on because
Mhm.
I probably work of my 60 hours a week, I probably work 30 of that at night, right?
Right.
Because that is when I work best. If
Mhm.
we have other women who are either taking care of kids during the day, any
Mhm.
of those kind of things that don't have flexible workplaces, those women are going to seem non-engaged, right? Which
Yes.
is going to prevent them from getting promotions, or they are
Mhm.
going to be forced to be non-engaged because they have to take
Right.
care of their children, whatever.
Mhm.
But when you allow that flexibility, I think what a lot of workplaces don't understand is you get that back because that
Absolutely.
creates a loyalty that I think some companies
Mhm.
don't understand. And it creates a kind of a bond because there have been times, everybody has those times when they're like, is there something better for me out there? But one of the things I always weigh it against is flexibility. Like I'm
Absolutely.
always like, I have so much flexibility that makes up for a little bit in pay, that makes up in a little bit for
Mhm.
position, because I
Mhm.
don't want to go somewhere where I'm not going to have that flexibility.
Absolutely. And it does make a difference, especially, for women, if, like I said, you have kids, you have parents, we get to the point for us where our kids are older, but now we have to start thinking about our parents.
Hmm.
And so balancing that is a very, very difficult thing. But in that whole realm of things is it still a matter of when women apply or women come into a position, does the person looking at them still have the mentality from whenever of, is she going to have kids? Is she going to be distracted with that? Is she
Hmm.
going to, is she, I had a situation a, I mean, it had to have been 15 years ago where I was interviewing and I found someone that I really, really wanted.
Hmm.
And when I knew that that was the person I wanted, the president of the company said to me, yeah, well, that's good because she's married and settled. And I said,
I've had people say that to me too.
interesting, because I'm not. And he says, yeah, oh no, but that's not, you have kids, you're settled, da 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 da. And I thought, so in his mind was, because she wasn't single, even though she was younger, she had her college degree, but she wasn't single, so she was going to be calm and not out partying, not coming in hungover. He didn't know anything about her.
Right.
We'd spent 20 minutes with her.
Yeah.
So are those, and he was a great guy. It has nothing to do with that. It's just is that the mentality still there?
Cultural stereotyping, right? Where it's just, there's certain assumptions and certain biases that people have, whether they realize it or not, whether it's intentional or not, whether they're a good person or not. There's those innate biases and natural assumptions, cultural assumptions, time-based assumptions that they operate off that are often fallacies. And, and it's cost a lot of women jobs. I think I've had, past employers that have said things like, well, I wonder if she's going to, want to have kids sometime soon. That's going to leave us, things that you shouldn't say.
Absolutely.
Might not be able to say as much today as back then, because we are, we do have that combined 60 years experience. So we are on the little older side. So maybe those things don't get said today, but I bet you they do, especially in male dominated rooms, because there is that perception that you can say those things among men that you couldn't say among women. And I think if most men, even the good ones, right, were honest with themselves, those are the kind of things that pop into their head just because that's what they're conditioned to think and conditioned to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's definitely unfortunate because it probably costs some good women, that would be real positive for the companies, good jobs. And it's, it just boils down to, do you not talk about that? Do you not say, do you not talk about your husband, your kids, your marital status? And of course, technically they can't ask, but there's always those questions, right? Like, that tell you the answer without asking the question.
Absolutely.
So it's very, very interesting. And it's back to this little, what does PricewaterhouseCoopers say? They say, priorities, value performance over presenteeism. Being in the physical room is no longer a determiner of commitment. So it's companies realizing that. And then here we go. Here's where it really, I think, locks in, right? Flexibility is important. Priorities, are important. Valuing performance and results over just being seen. And I think our company is definitely on that, is great in that area. And then growth. Help women progress into leadership by focusing on high growth roles and offering career advancement support. That is a big one too, is really letting people know, or letting women know, what is your next step and how do you get there? And then going back to that original thing that we were talking about making sure that companies are hiring, and women, we as women, make sure we are looking at the potential of a woman and not just what she's already accomplished. And I think that's a big one. I think that one is one that I read on LinkedIn a lot. I see it in other things. I hear women talking about it. I hear my friends talking about it, where men are getting consistently promoted and hired for positions they have never held, but women are having to prove that they can do it before they get the role, instead of, based on what their potential shows and their aptitude and their ability. It's having to be their past performance versus men are allowed to earn it.
Right. And it goes back to the why. What is it has to be a mentality, right? I mean, to me, because if you look at these things that we're reading here, it's not just about, can she grow into that, looking at it that way, but how can we help her grow into that, right? What tools do you need? What experience do you need? What things do you need to learn before going into that position, before going into that section, whatever the situation is? Are companies looking at how can we help you get to that growth, whether it's courses, whether it's, more training, whatever the situation is, because when you look at the whole big picture, it saves them money
Mm-hmm.
to do the promoting and to do the educating than it does to hire from outside
Mm-hmm.
or potentially bring someone in that they don't even know if they can do the job.
Mm-hmm. Or know the company, or know
Right.
the culture, or
Mm-hmm.
whether they're going to be a fit, and
Mm-hmm.
it is. And I think that is definitely one of the things that a lot of companies need to improve on, is
Yes.
creating that career progression plan, because it seems like a lot of companies, and again, I've as a consultant, I do leadership consulting, that as well, in addition to my full-time job, and going into companies and doing some of that leadership consulting. One of the things I do see so much is they think they are hiring women, and especially older women. And that's a subject that I plan to talk about in another one, is ageism, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
especially when you have women plus age, sometimes it can
Mm-hmm.
get really, really dicey. But
Mm-hmm.
in some of the companies I've been in, they assume that a woman is going into a role to stay there, right? So especially if she's on the older side, like if she's
Mm-hmm.
I am older, I'm 54, so I can say that, right? Especially if she's my age, or even in the 40s, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
40s, 50s. But they expect that if a woman is going into a role, that she's going into that role to stay, that that's where she wants
Right.
to be, versus they assume that men are always on an upward trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that assumption is another one that somehow we got to figure out as women, in business, and
Yes.
especially for the next
Mm-hmm.
generation. How do we resolve that, right? How do
Right.
we get past that? My dog's growling at my other dog over there.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we get, no. How do we get past that? How do we, really make it? Do we have to say going into a job interview, which I think is probably the start of the answer, since we talked about it all starts back at the
Mm-hmm.
interview? Do we have to say going into the job interview? Do we set the tone? We work, I won't say names because, I didn't ask her, but we work with a young lady who's very good at that, right? Who
Mm-hmm.
very good at setting, she's about 15 years younger than us, but she's really
Mm-hmm.
good at setting the tone of what she expects, what she
Mm-hmm.
will allow, what she won't allow, and what she wants. And she's very successful as a result. So looking at
Mm-hmm.
that, is that where we start in the job interview, making it clear, this is my plan, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
my plan. And this is
Mm-hmm.
what I want out of my career. Am I going to be able to find that here? Almost like we're interviewing the job instead of them interviewing the,
Right. Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
is saying, are you going to be able to give me what I need? Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
know, right? Going in, not saying these necessarily words, but going in and
Right.
saying, I know that I can do the job. I know that I
Mm-hmm.
can give you good results, but I need to make sure this is a match for me. What can you give me?
Mm-hmm.
This is what I want out of my career. I want to be this by this time, this by this time. And I know that there are no hard, set, and fast rules, but if I prove myself, what can I expect from you as a company
Right.
in my growth? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I could hear that young lady we were just talking about saying
Yeah.
that in an
Absolutely.
interview,
Yeah.
versus I have never been that bold in an interview,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's
Right.
where it starts.
I think that's exactly where it starts. And I think that some of that is too part of the thing that we don't learn. And my education was a little bit different than other people's, but nobody ever has these conversations or training with people or women to how to handle that interview. And
Mhm,
maybe that's where it starts, is
mhm,
mentoring and training these women to say, these young women coming in to say, even older women. I mean, for someone to mentor me, I really wish that when I was growing up and when I got to the point of looking for jobs, I had someone to say, here's what you need to know. Here's
mhm,
what you, and unfortunately, I didn't have that.
mhm,
And I think that's a key role that's missing,
mhm,
is I think that we need a class of some sort in
mhm,
school for
mhm,
them to just really say, here is what you need to do. Here's how you present yourself. Here's what you ask for. Everything is a negotiation.
mhm.
And that is the one thing that I did not know for years in an interview,
Neither,
that
me neither.
everything is a negotiation. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that you could negotiate how much time off you had, or
I didn't
how
either.
many days you worked in an office, or, this was before work from home, things like
Right.
that. But I did not know that those things were negotiable until watching someone else walk in with a better deal than me. And it's
Mhm.
my own fault. I'm
Right.
not saying that the company at that time, I'm not, and again, it's not this company, but years ago, I didn't even know it was a thing. I didn't know you could
Right.
do that, And I think those are the things that we have to really start mentoring women to do, whether they're joining the workforce, again, after being off as a caregiver, or starting out in the workforce, or just getting out of college. Those are things that we really need to be driving into them, that their skill set, everything, all of their knowledge has value,
Right.
that they've already earned that value.
Mhm.
And they need to take that value into the interview, instead of saying, I can prove myself, which is I've done multiple times. I'll
Mhm.
just go in here and make less than I can prove myself,
Mhm.
and then I'll be,
And that does
didn't
not work.
necessarily happen.
Mm. It just doesn't work. It's a
It
nice
doesn't.
thought, but I
It
feel like
is.
you set the tone, and like you just said,
Mhm.
in that beginning interview, you set the tone of how you're
Right.
going to be treated. You basically,
Mhm.
you know that saying, and I always mess up analogies, but it's like you teach people how they're going to treat you. I think
Yes, absolutely.
that is absolutely true. And I think
Mhm.
that starts in the interview. If you come in with that mentality of I'm less than, I
Yep.
or not, or I'm currently less than, right? But I can
Right.
prove myself. And
Mhm.
then when I prove myself, then I'll ask for these things. And I think it automatically sets it up as, it just it sets the perception of you as a
Yes.
person, as a leader for the eternity of your
Mhm.
employment there. I do not feel, or I feel that it is very hard to change that initial perception
Agreed.
and to change
Absolutely.
that initial dynamic. I feel like it's very hard. Like,
Mhm. I
I
agree.
mean, and especially, if you have like your senior leadership changing and coming and going,
Mhm.
and that is another point, right? Where it has to be addressed.
Yeah.
When you've got new leadership, it's almost like you need to reestablish that again. You need
Mhm.
to, and it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity
Absolutely.
to correct it if you
Mhm.
did it wrong in the beginning, but it's also an opportunity
Right.
to mess it up if you just kind of let it roll.
Well, and it's also an opportunity that you don't know what your relationship's gonna be with that next person,
Mhm. Mhm.
because you're never going to get along with everybody or work
Mhm.
well with everybody in your life.
Mhm.
It's just a reality.
Yeah.
But you never know when that leadership changes, how that's gonna affect you,
Mhm.
instead of you being part of that leadership moving up,
Mhm.
that you've now created a situation where they think you're fine. Oh,
Right.
she's happy where she is.
Mhm.
But no one's asked you that.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Or they don't
Mhm.
even know necessarily what you're capable of because they weren't
Correct.
in on that initial discussion.
Right.
But so, if you've got to basically, you've got to keep working at it and not coast. So
Mhm.
maybe that's something that we do in the future too. We have special little sessions on the interview
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
female empowerment. Like,
Mhm.
okay, going just to make sure we don't miss these last two: inclusion, know that culture creates change, not just policy, create an inclusive culture. And then leadership, gender parity cannot be delegated to human resources. For commitment to be authentic, change must flow from the top. And that is absolutely true. And I was going to bring up a book, Michelle, that I think that we should read and
Mhm.
maybe discuss in one of our sessions, but also that I think would probably be, I got to put my glasses on, would be good for anybody that listens to these. And it is by, I hope I put the URL in here. Oh, yeah, Miss Rachel Hollis. And she wrote a book, which I guess is a good segue to the next topic, unless
Mhm.
you had your second one, right?
Yeah, I did my second one. Yep.
Okay. So she wrote this book, Why I Wrote Girl Stop Apologizing. And I feel like this
Nice.
is a big part of it, right? The way we are
Mhm.
perceived, whether we are apologizing or whether we are, setting up ourselves as having the same level of power,
Mhm.
as our male counterparts, and making
Mhm.
sure I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to share an infographic again if I can figure out how to do it. So let's see. Yeah, this is all like I'm getting back used to it, but let's see. Here we go. Okay. Let's see if it shares correctly. There we go.
There you go.
There we go. Yay. All right. Oh, glasses went down there. 11 ways to stop over apologizing. So, sorry to bother you. I say that all the freaking time.
Yep.
And I think, you know, what her premise is of her book is that when we over apologize, we position ourselves as weak, as less than. And so we're setting up that perception in the eyes of others, whether it's conscious or subconsciously, but we're setting up that perception of ourselves as less than. So we're actually putting ourselves in a lower position and hindering our promotability because we are allowing ourselves to be seen as compliant, as weaker. So, you know, it says, sorry to bother you versus thanks for your time. And when I hear all the sorries, I'm like, geez, I say all of these way too much.
Right.
Sorry for the delay versus thanks for your patience. Sorry, I can't help versus here's what I can do. Sorry to interrupt versus before we move on. Now, I do that one all the time. How about you? I say that all the time. Sorry to interrupt. Or let me, you know, excuse me for interrupting for just a second. I say excuse me in place of I'm sorry a lot. And it's just, I think it's so negative in terms of perception, but I hadn't really thought about these. But, you know, sorry to disagree. I don't say that one. I do say I see it differently. Sorry for the confusion, or let me clarify. I say sorry for the confusion a lot. Sorry if I was confusing, or sorry if this is confusing. So that's what I need to back off of. I do. Sorry to be a pain versus I appreciate your help. I say sorry to be a pain quite a bit. Probably because I am a pain, but I should phrase it correctly. Sorry, can I ask a question? I don't say that one, but instead it would be, I'd like to understand. Sorry, I got that wrong versus great catch. Thank you. Sorry, I don't understand. Or could you please clarify? Or sorry, I can't attend. I do that one a lot. And then just, I won't be able to make it. So how about you? Do you feel like you use those I'm sorry's?
I do a lot. I find that I have been really trying to retrain myself from it because this is something actually, because I have an all-female team, I actually worked with my team on because I get from my team a lot, sorry to be a pain. I don't want to bother you. I know you're really busy. Well, I'm there to be there for them. So it's never them bothering me.
Right.
So it is something I have started working on with them. And probably about a year ago, it's something that I really noticed from a couple of my daughters. And I realized that they got it from me. So I started trying to retrain them and myself in all of that. But it is really, it's really an incredible thing because a lot of times they say it goes back to a whole, you know, when we're younger and they teach us again to be kind, be patient, be what, you know, all of these things. And women automatically are like, oh, sorry, I'm not catching what you're saying. Or, you know, we're an automatic peacemaker. And I think that we, for a long time, thought that sorry was like an easy way to smooth into something where actually it just, and I don't want to call it weakness because it's something that's innate with us, right? It's not a weakness. It's a retraining. We have to retrain ourselves.
Exactly. And you know, I was thinking about it when I was picking this topic as my second topic. I was thinking about it. I was like, well, why do I do that? Right? Why do I do that? And I think it's just that we came up in a time where I think we had to, and I don't mean we as me and you, I mean we as females had to sort of apologize for interrupting, second guessing, correcting our male counterparts. And that's just really been built into me. And so while I don't feel less than, I feel like they expect it from me. They expect me to say, I'm sorry. And in fact, you know, I sent an email the other day and to our, you know, boss 2 levels up. And I said something, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Da, da, da. And he actually replied back and said, you don't have to apologize. And I was like, dadgummit, why did I say I'm sorry? Right. But you know, so he's definitely good about that, you know, not
he is,
to say I'm sorry, right? But it just, made me realize that it's my assumptions I've got to correct too, right? Because my assumption is that my male counterparts, especially those that are older, I don't necessarily do it to those that are younger.
Right.
But for some reason, it's that, respect your elders that I grew up with. And so even if they're not much older than me, or if they're my age, but they're in a senior position, then it's like that kind of elder role, right? Where
the mentality.
yeah. And so it's like, I've got to quit assuming that they want me to apologize, that they're bothered by my interruption.
Right.
Because my opinion is just as valuable. And I've got to, I feel that way. So I've got to stop acting like it's not.
Right. Right. I absolutely agree. And yeah, it is definitely something that I still have to work on. And I think, I was told a lot growing up in life, work, whatever situation was, that I was a lot.
Me too.
And I'm still a lot, and I'm okay with it now.
There's nothing wrong with being a lot.
There's nothing wrong with it. I realize now, but I think that might be some of where the sorry comes from, because we were,
apologizing for our presence.
Correct.
And the stress that we put on the situation.
Yes.
Because we are that good kind of trouble for business, for women in business. We push the limits. We are overachievers. We are type A. We are, like you said, a lot, but we accomplish a lot, right?
Absolutely.
And so, yes, that's what I need to own more. Yes, I am a lot, but I do a lot because of that.
That's right.
I am a lot, but I accomplish a lot because of that.
Right. I am a lot, and that's why I'm hired.
Right.
That's why I have the positions I have, the experience I have, and the success I have is because I am a lot.
A lot, but all the way around. You may have
all the way around.
Put up with a lot, but you're going to get a lot.
Right. And I was a lot as a mom.
Me too.
I was the squeaky wheel for my kids, and I advocated for them. And then I also didn't let them get away with anything. So, they will absolutely tell you that I'm a lot, but that's okay. you know, and it gets all of us through. And it's the same thing with work. I'm a lot. And people I work with now will probably tell you that, but it gets things done.
Right. Exactly.
You have to own and accept. And again, back to unapologetically.
Yep. I'm definitely going to read this book, and maybe we can read it and have a book review in one of our sessions, because I think that is kind of at the heart of all of it. Stop apologizing for who we are and own it. I can't imagine a man even saying, I'm sorry, I'm a lot, right? He would be like, of course I'm a lot,
Right.
He's right. I'm a power mover, whatever the term is.
Right. Exactly.
But I can't imagine a man apologizing for it. And it's interesting. You were saying earlier that everything is a negotiation. And that's one of the things that I read in one of the articles I read on McKinsey preparing for this, was that's one of the chief differences is men see everything as negotiation, while women don't. They see that there are rules. We perceive rules, and that there are certain rules we have to follow, and that we follow the rules, versus men feel like they are supposed to be mavericks and break the rules. And so that is one of the things that holds a lot of women back, is we feel like if we do certain things, we're going to be breaking the rules. Ask for a promotion, ask for a raise, and we're afraid to complain because we don't want to be seen as whiny or the complainer. So instead, or a lot, we don't want to be perceived as a lot. So instead, we suck it up and hold it in, and therefore we don't make progress because we're not willing to advocate for ourselves as much as our male counterparts. And again, one of the best examples I've seen of not doing that is the young lady we're talking about. She advocates for herself all the time, and and she gets a lot of what she wants because of it, and it's because of that advocating. And sometimes, it can, and I'm not talking about her, I'm talking about me or any woman who's doing that, right, can be perceived as that a lot. But I think, again, we just kind of hit one of the nails on the head, is we got to own that and be willing to own it. And instead of apologizing for it, say, you're damn right, I'm a lot, and I'm going to give you a lot. and produce a lot. So you decide what you want. Do you want me
Right.
to be complacent and that's what you're
Mhm.
going to get? Or do you want results and you're going to have to
Correct.
deal with it a lot?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's setting that from the beginning, setting that
Yes.
from the start. And I think
Yes.
we hit the nail on the head. It starts there. And that's probably one of the
Absolutely.
things that, we need to research and we need to do a podcast
Yes.
on is how do you set the stage? One of
Yes.
the things that I did back when I did a very short stint as a recruiter between my mortgage broker job and when I started my own business. And in that process, one of the things I learned from doing recruiting is that the first 30 days when you're at a new job will really determine the rest of your tenure at that job for the most part, right? There can always be
Interesting.
extenuating
Yeah.
circumstances. But I noticed that if people made it past the first 30 days and really wowed their employer, that
Mhm.
generally speaking, they were going to stick around, right? They were going to stick
Interesting.
around. They
Yeah.
were going to, move, not necessarily move up, but they were going to be successful in that role, kind of like
Mhm.
in school. When I used to teach high
Mhm.
school, the first 30 days, whatever that first impression I got of that student and their work in the first 30 days was hard to change, right?
Mhm.
Same kind of
Sure.
thing where you set the tone. And so I'd actually written a book that I never published. I probably have to dig back out, but I had done a whole bunch of statistics on that. And it was called, the first, I can't remember, something about the first 30 days determines, how long you'll keep your job or something like that.
Mhm.
So that's probably a concept to revisit too.
Yeah.
Is
Absolutely.
setting the tone, setting the pace,
Mhm.
setting the stage, setting the
Mhm.
impression, and that is probably going back to those articles where it all starts.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What was your third
Absolutely.
topic? Did you have a third topic? Or did
Yes.
we?
So, and we kind of touched on it. So,
Okay.
pay gap and economic inequity.
Mm.
So, okay. So, here we go.
Okay.
So, even when women stay in the workforce and climb the ladder, another hurdle is the paycheck, right?
Mhm.
So, the gender gap is still so stubborn. The
Mhm.
US gender pay gap has barely budged in 20 years. According to Pew in 2023, women earn 82 cents for every dollar a man makes. And that is Black women, it is 64 cents. And Latina women, it is 57 cents
Holy
for
cow.
every dollar. So women retire with 30% less savings than men, largely due to wage disparities and career breaks, caregiving, right?
Mhm.
So according to the World Economic Forum, the US data, the emerging risk is that approximately 58% of jobs at the highest risk of automation are currently held by women.
Mhm.
So that's the question, is why do these barriers still exist? Number one,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And what do we do about it? Like, what, how do we do that? Now, again, negotiating in the interview, like we said,
Absolutely. I think that's step
sure.
one. Mhm.
That's step one. I feel like that's step one in a lot of these, in all
Yeah.
three that I had at
Yeah.
least.
Setting the tone.
And, setting the tone. But at the same time, when you have companies that have a set
Pay
something,
structure. Mhm.
how, how do you get them through that? How do you do that? And why in 2025 are we still there when there is so much where we're on the same level or higher
Mhm.
than our counterparts and we're still making 82 cents to every dollar that they make? I mean, think about what that looks like for retirement for women.
Just yeah.
That's huge.
Well, I do
That's
know
huge.
why it started. Ironically, I can't remember where this came up or why I learned it, but I do know where it started. It started because when women entered the workforce, they were the second wage earner, right? So
Right.
it was actually allowed to have formulas that women contributed, 20%, 30%
Mhm.
to the household. So the women were paid that percentage of what they would pay a man. So it wasn't based on their work or their hours
Right.
or performance. It was based on the contribution to the household. Now,
Mhm.
when that changed, was during the war when men went off to
Mhm.
war and the women went into the factories and stuff and the whole
Right.
array and, all
Right.
of that. So that's when it started to change, but it still, as we can see today, did not change
Mhm.
completely. But
Right.
it also goes back to, and I know you said it, is the initial interview, right? Because it all starts with base salaries.
Mhm.
Now, one of the things like government universities do very well in a way
Yeah.
is they set pay scales and it doesn't matter, right?
They do set pay scales, but there still are disparages in how you get to the higher levels.
Correct.
But
Correct.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But at least, at least they're standardized. Well, I don't want to
Right.
say at least because I don't know if I like it, but I mean,
Right, right.
there
But
is,
when you take the position in that
yeah,
situation, you know what those levels are.
right.
You
And
go
you know what
into
to
that with
expect
an
from
open eye, you know.
it.
Correct. Mhm.
Teachers are like that too.
Yep.
Starting teacher makes this, second
Mhm.
year, third year, fourth year.
Mhm.
It's very, very set. It's an enterprise, which, in a
Mhm.
capitalistic society, I guess, in enterprise, you can take the job or leave it, right? That's what a lot of businesses
Mhm.
say. This is
Right.
you're offered. And so it goes back to knowing our worth, like knowing
Mhm.
what we are worth, and then making sure that in the interview, we realize that this is a negotiation and we don't approach it timidly. We don't say, well, can you do, can
Right.
you? We have to be ready to walk away from people that, because it's not going to get better, right? And that's one of the things I wish I would
Mhm.
have known or realized when I was younger is you're not, just like you're not going to change a mate, you're not going to
Yep.
change your employer. It's
Yep.
not going to get better, right? It may
Right.
a little bit, but in general, you're not going to change the mindset of your
Correct.
employer. So you got to make sure
Correct.
that you interview your employer as much as they're interviewing you.
Absolutely. And it also comes down to the thing though where it becomes an issue to me and in my opinion when recruiters or all of that are saying what salary range are you looking for?
I hate
What are
that.
you making now? What are you doing? Well, you know, it varies. The
Mhm.
salary range I have now doesn't mean I'm doing the exact job I'm about to do.
Right.
So, there's just there's a lot of things that go into it. And I feel like we're going backwards on
I
the
agree.
salary scenario because of the way we address it.
I think that
And
question should be illegal. Like, what pay
I
range are
agree.
you looking for? I think it
Hmm.
should be because you don't want to price yourself out, right? You don't want to
Correct.
say, but then you don't want to price yourself under. And
Right.
I think that perpetuates the problem. I do not
Hmm.
think that question should be able to be asked. I think there should be a range that they have and then they
Right.
will tell you. And what's bad is, I've been helping my younger son, look for jobs. And so I've seen a lot of these applications. And what's bad is they don't let you skip it and they don't let you
Correct.
put negotiable or they don't let you
Correct.
you have to put something.
Right.
And
And I am fine with employers saying, this is our range.
right,
Okay. Tell me your range. I can tell you if I'm okay with that or not.
correct,
And then we can move on.
right.
But don't come to me and say, what are you making now? What do you need to make? Or what are you expecting to make for this job? Blah, 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 blah. Tell me what you can do. And
Mm-hmm.
then I can make the conscious decision of, do I believe that's correct for that? Do I think I can have a conversation with you? Or do I not waste anyone's time? Because to me, it's a waste of time if they
Mm-hmm.
don't list what they're willing to pay for the
Absolutely.
job. And I think that it's a
Absolutely.
trap.
Mhm. I do
Honestly,
too.
I feel
No,
like it's a trap.
I do too. I feel like it is literally only on behalf of the business
Mhm.
because I feel like businesses that are hard and fast about that are all about the bottom line. They're
Yes.
not necessarily trying to find the best person. They're trying to save
Mhm.
themselves money. And in the past, I've come to realize that that's just not the kind of place I want to work for because
Right.
it just speaks to me volumes about what's going to happen in the future. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you.
And I
So
think it's going to take
that's
women. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Now, I just think it's going to take women and I think
Mhm.
we're seeing this more in the younger generation
Mhm.
than in our generation. I think it's going
Yes.
to take women being willing to walk away from the table
Mhm.
for these companies to learn and to say, I don't think this is the right fit for me, right? And
Mhm.
doing that, and not taking the job, again, thinking that you can change your employer, is knowing your worth and saying, if you can't tell me the range, it's like when you're married, or if you're single and when you have a boyfriend, all of a sudden you start getting all these kind of attention and all this kind of interest. It's that way with the job too, right?
Right.
When you're happy in your job, all of a sudden you get all these recruiters that want to contact you and want to talk to you. That is a good time, in my opinion, and there may be people that differ with me, but in my opinion, that is a good time to work on these strategies, right? Because you don't necessarily want to leave your current job. You don't need to leave your current job. So it's a good time to work on being confident, and maybe even working yourself up to a promotion in your existing job by seeing what you're worth when nothing's on the line, right? So it's like, okay, what, let's play this game, right? Let's play this game. What do you think I'm worth? And if you're not willing to tell me, then I'm walking away.
Exactly.
And I've done that before and it works. I feel like it's such a game, because there was a time, when I was happy in my current job, but I was like, okay, well, let's see, right? Let's see how this works. And went through the process, and I didn't need the job, didn't want the job, really didn't want to leave my current job. So I was very confident in the whole discussion. Like, no, if you can't tell me what the range is going to be, then we can just stop here, because I don't want to waste your time. Don't want to waste my time. Well, we prefer to get your range. Well, that's not going to happen.
No.
I was like, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to tell me what you're willing to pay for this position. If it were anybody, what is your range? And like you said, I will tell you if that's acceptable. And it worked. And the company was like basically begging me to take the job. And I'm like, where was this, years ago? Right.
Exactly.
A new job. And so anyway, I think that's a good time to practice.
I think it is too. And I think it's always good to have that, I'm a big believer in, you should always talk to people, because you never know where it's going to lead. You never know what the next direction is you're supposed to be taking. But if nothing else, it definitely helps with confidence, because then regardless of whether you even have a conversation with your current employer or not about it, it's about you. It's about understanding that your value. And if it helps you understand your value, then that's great. You always have to do what's best for you. And that's the biggest thing, is we don't have loyalty anymore. But the pay scale, the C-suite, all of these things could bring loyalty back from women, because women are and will be the most loyal.
I tell you, I am the most loyal in the world when I feel like I'm being treated well. When I feel like I'm not being treated well, I'll take it for a while. Right. And that's just the woman in me. That's the people pleaser, but that's also the I can change you. Right. That's the
correct. Right.
I can do that one thing that will change their opinion, and will change their perception, and will change the way they think, act, and behave. It's that savior complex, I guess.
Right.
But ultimately, if I feel disrespected, then why should I be loyal? Right.
Agreed.
Why should I be committed to you if you're not treating me well? It's kind of like in relationships. There's a lot of analogies there. Is if you're not treating me well, if you're not being treated well, then you're doing yourself a disservice by staying in a relationship. And if a company is not treating you well, unless there is some extenuating circumstance like hyper flexibility, fantastic pay, whatever, unless there's some extenuating circumstance, if they're not treating you well, then you're not doing yourself any favors by staying there.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. You ready for my third topic? Because I know
I'm ready.
An hour, so this one will be pretty quick. But this is one that I have heard a lot. You probably have too in your career, is especially when I was younger. I don't hear it as much, but I still hear it every now and then, is women get by on their looks, or, that's one reason why women don't get promoted is because they're just a pretty face, or, or the opposite of that. Well, she got promoted because she is, an attractive woman, or, I don't want people to think I'm promoting her because she's an attractive woman. There's so many nuances to that, right? Same with nice, if I'm nice, then I am, too nice, and then I'm not seen as powerful. But if I'm not nice, I'm a bitch, right?
So right.
Where do you, walk that line? So one of the interesting things on here is that this was a study of that. And it basically came to find out that all of the opposite of that is true, is that attractive women, kind of based on some of those reasons in the workforce, actually it hinders them. So people thinking that women get by on their looks, or, you know, she made it on her looks, is actually the opposite. Is women are in powerful positions. If they are too feminine, they are perceived as weak. If they are too girlish, they're perceived as not powerful. So, you know, kind of let's think of the women in Congress, right? Or the women on the news even. And some of that has changed a little bit in recent years, but we've noticed, especially when I was in my 20s and 30s. Here's a good example. In college, I was a news reporter in college, and I was told, I had long hair, a little bit longer than it is now. And, you know, at 20, I was a pretty cute little girl. And so I was told that I was not going to make it if I didn't cut my hair because I needed to look serious. And that was kind of the mentality back then, is that if you didn't look serious, you weren't going to get promoted, because the implication was you needed to look more like a man.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't, then you weren't serious. And so it's interesting that this study basically found that men who are attractive get promoted a lot more often versus women who are attractive do not get promoted at all. What do you think about that?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it has to do with confidence in the workplace as much as I'm not, you know, as much as the looks, because even though, you know, you can be an attractive female in the workplace and still not have confidence.
True. And it could also be, and it could be kind of an extension of that, where if you're afraid that people won't perceive you as, you know, confident, as powerful,
Right.
you know, do you feel like your looks are going to hold you back? So you basically exude that.
Right. Or
Whether
you
you intend to
sabotage
or not.
yourself, right? Yeah.
Self-sabotage, basically.
So that's interesting, because I'm surprised by it,
I am
honestly.
too. Us too.
I would have never thought that. However, I will say that women, in my experience, history, all of that, would be a lot more concerned about being told that they got a position, or being said by anyone that they got a position, a promotion, and anything because of the way they looked, and men would probably just laugh it off.
Yeah. I
You
agree.
know?
I agree. Can you
And
see
so
this?
maybe that is something like, I don't know. It's interesting to me, though.
It's a very interesting topic to me too. I happened to read this and I was like, I want to see what Michelle thinks about this. Because, like, read this. It says, I can't even pronounce these names. These guys found that women's attractiveness is typically characterized by weak feminine traits, like being passive, agreeable, tender, and loving.
Interesting.
The author also points out that some corporate cultures favor masculine traits. So while men are expected to lead with decisiveness, women are discouraged from taking up jobs with high level of authority and given harmful labels such as difficult or bossy, or I would say, or too much, because it's seen as unattractive. In other words, being an attractive woman is incompatible with ingrained stereotypes and expectations people might hold for business leaders. You have to be liked enough to be invited to the table, but not so likable that you're considered a pushover or not qualified to be a leader. There are still limiting gender biases we haven't overcome. For women, beauty can be a liability.
That is so interesting to me. And I believe it. Like, you know, as you look back and think about different things, and I'm like, oh, you know, and that's interesting to me.
Me too. And then when I start thinking about, like, CEOs I've seen, you know, who are women, who are not all, of course, but, you know, there is a lot of, I can think of, like, congresswomen, you know, who downplay their attractiveness. Now they might be attractive, but they downplay it
To be
in
taken
order
more
to
serious is how it used to be when we were growing up, right? They're like, oh, they're not going to take you, like you said, with your hair, for example. You know, they're not going to take you as serious if you look this way or look that way. And to your point, you look at, you know, the politicians growing up or
Mhm.
the CEOs now, any of that sort of stuff, all are going to fall in that same category. So yeah, it's not something I ever thought about, and it does surprise me, but it does make sense as we talk through it.
I know. And it's like, like a lot of these women, like I'm thinking about congresswomen and CEOs, like I mentioned,
Hmm.
where they're very attractive and polished. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
they do their hair very well. They wear,
Hmm.
decent jewelry, right? Maybe,
Hmm.
but they definitely don't seem to spend time. Like they don't appear to spend time on their appearance. It's
Right.
very polished, look versus trying to appear attractive. And it says right here, other research has shown attractive women are often seen as less capable or less qualified for their positions than their peers, and in some cases, less trustworthy. Attractive men did not face similar repercussions. So it says women feel so much pressure to modify and police their bodies, there's almost no margin for error. Blah, blah, blah. Women are held to a specific standard of attractiveness and are often punished when they fail to uphold that standard, but then they're punished when they do. So I thought that was super, super interesting. And
It
here's another
absolutely is.
fact for you that kind of what we were mentioning earlier. The United States ranked 43rd among 143 countries included in the World Economic Forum's 2023 Global Gender Parity Index. 43rd among 143.
Jeez. Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, and it asks that could be one of the reasons why inequality between attractive men and women manifests in the workplace in the United States in such a blatant way. It'd be interesting to see if that same issue exists in a more egalitarian country like Finland or Denmark. So,
Hmm.
that would be super interesting
That would be interesting to do some research on.
is to see if that, exists where there's already more parity, already more
Right.
equality.
That is so interesting. I never would have thought that.
I wouldn't have either. I thought it was interesting. I came across it on LinkedIn and it said,
Mhm.
attractive women are often penalized in the workplace and men are rewarded for their attractiveness. And or something along that line. So I was like, what?
Yeah.
And so I went and read the article and I was like, well, that is interesting because I wouldn't have thought that, but it makes a lot of
Wouldn't
sense.
have either. Yeah. Yeah. No, same. Like I wouldn't have thought it, but it definitely makes sense. And as you think back about things, like it definitely makes sense on stuff for sure.
Mhm. Well, I mean, so I think, that's just another thing that we women, right, have to think about.
Right.
Be attractive, but not too attractive. And
Right.
if you want to be promoted. And honestly, I cannot think of any other than outside of the cosmetic companies, right? The cosmetic
Hmm.
companies, the magazines, outside of that,
Hmm.
outside of the entertainment world in general, I cannot think about. And if anybody ends up watching this video after it's posted on our channel and not live, if you can think of someone, please post it in the comments because I cannot think of a woman that I would consider who really stands out as attractive, who is the CEO of a company.
Is C-suite or something like that. Yeah, that
Mhm.
would be interesting. I'd also be interesting to hear from everyone if they, whenever of which of these things they feel is impacting them the most or their
Right.
stories
I
about
would
dealing
be
with them.
very interested too. And
And any tips on how they dealt with it or deal with it.
because it's definitely an ongoing. I know I don't have all the answers, right? Because
Mm-mm.
it's especially, we come from a time and we'll probably, sometime we probably should have our friend on that we were talking about, the young lady
Yes.
who's
Hmm.
so confident and sets those standards
Hmm.
and boundaries. And she's a millennial, and I feel like that is more common in
Hmm.
millennials than say Gen Z or that is
Hmm.
Gen Z, Gen X or no,
Hmm.
millennials are Gen Y, aren't they?
Gen Y, yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So Gen Z, the newest generation, I'm not sure, right? I haven't worked with
Hmm.
a lot of Gen Zs. Um,
Hmm.
but I
I
think
have two of them.
yes,
And
you do. And
I
maybe we'll
have
have one of your daughters on. And
they're kind of different ends of the spectrum too. So it would be
mhm.
interesting to see what their thoughts are in it too.
Maybe we do have them on and get that perspective and see what
Hmm.
they're thinking and how they're resolving this in their mind. But I do
Hmm.
feel like it is largely a Gen X issue, especially when you combine the age and the way we were raised, right?
Agreed.
Is don't be a problem, children are seen, not heard. So we grow up with that perception, especially female children, right? You're always
Absolutely.
at risk. You're always weaker. You're
Right.
always, deferring to the men, the males in the room. That's what a lot of us were taught, not just necessarily by our parents, but by society, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is, and so I think that has carried over into the workforce, and we're not done yet, right? We are still
Right.
50 is the new 30, I mean, it's
Right.
real. It's like
Yeah,
look
absolutely.
at the Golden Girls, and Rue McClanahan was like, she was actually what, 53 when she was playing Blanche, and I was
Right.
very beautiful woman, not saying anything negative about Rue, but she looked every bit of 70 in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like what I would think of as 70.
What we would consider it be. Right. Yeah. It's a different
Yeah.
thing now, right?
It's like,
Yeah.
I'm 54, you're what, 55?
55.
Yeah, and I'm not done yet, and I feel like I do not look old. So all you other women that are out there in the same position we are, we're not done yet. We probably still have 10, 15. I'm getting on the tired of working side. So I probably have 10, 15 years, but I still have to be ready for retirement. Right.
Right.
So 10, 15 years, and then I want to do something. And maybe I'll still be working. I just don't necessarily know that I want to be working for somebody else when I'm.
Me too.
When I'm
Yeah, that's kind of the thought process is I don't know. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't
working. You hear what I said when I'm 70 and 15 years. Holy crap.
Oh my God.
Holy crap. Like 15 years when I'm 70.
Right.
I don't want to be working for someone else when I'm 70.
No. Definitely.
I really just don't. And it's, I'm already at almost 30 years. And so adding another 15 to that, I just don't think I want to work for someone else, even if it's the best employer in the world, right?
It doesn't matter. It's just because I want to, you want to be able to do your own timeline and all of that, right? You don't want to, and you don't want to have to get up every day and be on that timeline.
Absolutely not. And so, but that's still 15 years, right? And there's probably a lot of women out there who are like us who, we together, I think we can all figure it out and make that last 10 to 15 years really beneficial, really
absolutely
end our careers on a high note, whether it's with our current employers, hopefully, but maybe, or whether we decide, and I don't mean we, but I mean, as a, collective, we women, metaphorically, whether it's with our with our current employer, or whether, that's where someone else or where somewhere else, but just making the last 10 to 15 years count, right? Especially for those of us that are type A overachievers. I cannot just coast for the last 15 years of my career.
That's why I say afterwards, I'm still like, I don't know. I'll have to be doing something.
Yep.
I can't, I can't just sit. I think that's part of our generation too, right? You don't just sit, but
no. So, all right, you ladies, if you're out there and see this later, please tell us, what you think about these topics, and, whether all the things, right? Do you see the pay gap? Do you see the way you're perceived and treated, your promotability, your hireability? How do you stand up or not stand up for yourself in your interview? Do you say, I'm sorry all the time? Those are the kind of things, that I want to hear. And again, I'm really curious to know if anybody can think of a super, and I don't mean super attractive, like model necessarily, but a CEO, CMO, CFO, CTO in a, company, not necessarily a magazine or cosmetic, because again, we would expect to see that there, right?
Right. It's a little bit different.
Enterprise, manufacturing, CPG, any of those kind of industries. Have you seen a CEO, CMO that is someone who seems to focus on making herself attractive, right? Not just appearing polished, but because I can't think of it. I seriously can't.
I can't either, but I'd be curious. Hopefully someone can tell us.
Yeah,
give us some
Anything
ideas.
you want to add, Michelle?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And good night. Peace.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.